This is actually in my garden. I have 5 hepatica plants, and they've done well for the last 2 years. I dug them out of a ditch. And leatherleaf,
Beautiful.
bog plant.
Lovely.
This would be in late April, early May. And of course, rhodora. That doesn't usually blooms the end of May, early June. And at about the same time, the red-berried elder is coming on stream. And this past year, for the first time, I've seen painted trilliums in May. You just don't see them until the beginning of June. I found this one in May, the last week of May, in St. Margaret's Bay. In the Arthurs in the bogs, and Clintonia. And this one, I've forgotten what it is.
It looks like Minuartia or whatever it's called now.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, the mountain sandwort. Thank you. There it is there. It was supposed to go the other way. That was supposed to show first. It didn't. Okay. And that's the Lower Sloria, this Hudsonia, this nice little yellow plant up on the barrens. And this you cannot see with the naked eye. This is the berry, the fruit of the broom crowberry. I looked at it carefully with the naked eye and I could not see it. With my binoculars, my papilio binoculars, I could just barely see something. And when I used the macro lens with an extension tube, this is what I got. I could see it. The camera could see it better than I could. But these are the fruiting bodies.
It looks like Amesii eye, Charlie, the pink one.
Yeah, no, it's not. This is the broom crowberry.
Oh, the broom. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. It just
Yeah.
looks like the other one. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and I didn't know they were this color.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Boy, it certainly looks like Amesii eye, doesn't it?
yeah. Okay, cranberry. And this is one of my favorite Scirpus. Scirpus hattorianus. That's hattorianus. The mosquito bulrush. Got this nice delicate stem. There's another photograph in there somewhere of that. It'll probably come up in a minute. The bladderwort. There it is right there, a little more mature. They're hard to distinguish from the other Scirpus because they grow in the same area and they're always often together. And the Marsh St. John's wort. The threadleaf sundew.
Wow.
And this is where we went to a fen, I think it's Harris Lake. Bob, you remember the lake? Down near East Ferry.
Oh, Harris.
Yeah, Harris Lake. And
These
we're
are-
looking for the little yellow flower, which is right there.
Peckii.
Yes. And fairy puke. It's one of my favorite little lichens.
Where did you see that, Charlie?
Oh God, it's all along the roadside, anywhere on the highway, on 103 highway. There's patches of it everywhere. And this, the cladonia with fire moss. These little red stems with it. That's one of my hepaticas. This is bloodroot. This is in my garden. In the back, the blue flowers is William and Mary. This was in early April. This was at the Frog Pond in March. Pussy willows last year. And this is my Daphne in March. Jeff will remember this. Skunk cabbage in the bog. And this was in Smiley's Park in June. This was in early June. The hazelnut, both the male catkins and the female flower. This is Karima Conradi here. Male and female plants. These are the male plants in the dark. These light green ones, the female. Again, this is on Highway 103, and there's patches of this all over the place, both sides of the road. It's a divided highway now, so it's on both sides, not in the median. And I think that's my last slide.
Our two
I guess before we
faces.
move on too, I should allow people to ask any questions if they have any to Charlie.
They are beautiful photographs. What kind of camera do you use?
That was a mixture of cameras, usually a Panasonic G85 and an Olympus TG4 Tough. I use the Panasonic most of the time.
It really brought spring back for all of us, Charlie. Thank you so much.
Are you
That
seeing-
was a spirit lifter.
Anne, are you good?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just slideshow. Is that okay?
Yep.
You are sharing screen, it says.
It's good.
Good.
Okay, so everybody else mute, myself included.
All right, we'll start again. I was looking around for a picture that or had photo I had taken in this fall. I guess it was late summer, and our field, which is just beyond the house, was just covered in black knapweed, which is up top here, and solidago, one of the many species of solidago. And I just thought it was really quite pretty. It just took over, you know, as far as you could see. So I thought I'll use that one for the first slide, just as a cover. And talk about Karima Conradi, Broom Cranberry. This photo was taken at Owl's Head in early April. Francis Anderson and I went up to, when we were concerned about what was happening up there, we decided to go up, and we spent 4 days walking and hiking and going over the amazing quartzite ridges and what was growing on it. And of course, this was April 4th or 5th, so it was very early. It was this wonderful display of broom crowberry. And here's how it looks all the way across here. And it was on a rock in between all sorts of things. This is, I shouldn't say on a rock, it was one of the quartzite ridges. And it's really, I was trying to think how I've got a whole lot of photographs of this, but it doesn't really show it up as well as this does, because you've got lichens, and somebody can tell me, is this what's this one here? Is that yew? Is that a yew?
It looks
Juniper?
like the
Juniper, I think.
juniper.
Oh, juniper, that's it, juniper. Yeah, exactly. And of course, more lichens here, both crustose and foliose. It was just an amazing experience, because all of those areas were just full of broom crowberry. Now, this one you might might wonder about. I don't know if anyone, like maybe even John Maunder, might have seen yellow Sarracenia purpurea before.
Yeah,
Have you?
yeah. It's not common.
No, well, I've never seen it like this before.
It's,
And I was walking along the road from our place, from our camp, down to Western Light, and there's a huge meadow there, which is, you know, has bog mostly in it, but all sorts of other little ponds and so on. And I saw this big yellow patch, and I thought, what the heck is that? So I walked over as carefully as I could, and the closer I got, the more I realized that I had kind of like a leucistic Sarracenia, which I had never seen before. So I photographed it multiple times. And I'm interested to know that someone else has also seen them before, but it's quite a sight to see.
yeah,
Hmm?
it's got a name, you know, it's not so much leucistic, but it is genetically slightly different. It's got a name describing the variety, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's a variety.
Whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I'm not sure it would be a variety even, because it's one of those things that I had never seen before.
Well,
And
we
I
only
think-
see maybe 2 and 3, 4 clumps of it in an area, and then we mightn't see it again for weeks. It's not common, but it does grow in sort of little patches in amongst the other ones.
Well, what I'm curious about is whether we see it next year.
You should,
Yeah, and because I had never seen it before.
you should.
Later on in the summer, it was in July, I guess, and Francis and Catherine and I went to, this is Dalbardia, of course, Dalabarda. It's near Digby, and it's a park.
Acaciaville. Acaciaville, it's in your,
Acaciaville Trails, yes, park. And I had never seen, I don't remember seeing Dalabarda before. And the interesting thing about it is that it has these little droplets called lutation around the tip ends of the leaves in the pores, which would be the can't think of the name, that come up from each of the veins. And it's caused by root pressure that is greater than the transport system. And it just comes out in little beads around the edge of the leaves. And you can see it quite well up in one, because this doesn't always, but you can see a couple of them. And by mid-morning, they were all gone. So it's called dewdrop, but it is not dew. This is something that comes, shows itself internally.
Is that a native species, Anne?
I think it is.
it is, yeah. I think it's been put into rubus now.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I remember seeing that, but I thought I'd just leave it as that. And it's a good point of discussion.
Is it one of those plants that is just confined to the Digby area, like Briar Island area, or?
Well, that I don't know, because I had never seen it before.
No, it's all over. I see it all over the province.
Common around Wilson's Lake.
Okay.
And there's a lot of it on the trail at Mount Uniacke.
It's quite
Ah.
small. It's quite small. Yeah.
But it's very pretty. Okay, Centaurea erythrae, I had never seen this before. And in August, Eric, while Eric was on a pelagic bird trip in Pubnico, West Pubnico, I went down to Pubnico Point and saw this pink flower that I had not seen before. Now, that's not unusual that I haven't seen some of these photographs, some of these plants before, because I don't botanize as much as I used to in the vascular plant realm. My stuff has gone to the mosses. And so I tend to overlook these. But Centaurea, it's in, well, as it's saying down there, it's in wet dune hollows and sandy roadsides. And then this is That's just the flower. I wanted people to see the detail, little point pink flowers. And this is one area just a little beyond that, which is slightly sandy soil on that point. And there was just a crowd of them. And I have, again, about a dozen photographs of them. This one's interesting. We spent 5 days on Seal Island off Yarmouth in October for Thanksgiving. And a second, probably the last day, I had gone up the shore to the North Point and came back to North Home where we were staying. And I thought, what's that? It's an odd flower. I don't remember seeing that before. And there were 2 of them there, multi-petaled, instead of just 4 or 5 that you would find in an ordinary ranunculus flower. So has anybody seen those before as well? John, are you?
Actually, yes, John here again in Newfoundland. They're very rare, but I have seen them at a place called Point Crew, Crewe, on the very southern tip of the Burin Peninsula, on the very southern part of Newfoundland.
Okay.
And there were a few of them there together, but it's the only place I've ever seen them. But yeah, same thing.
Well, this was completely new to me, but I was delighted to see it, and I wanted to show people because there's bound to be somebody like yourself who's seen this multi-petaled ranunculus before.
They're quite startling.
I've seen it here too, Anne, here in Cape Breton.
Pardon?
It occurs here in Cape Breton as
Does it?
well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've seen it in a few locations. It took me by surprise the first time I encountered it as well.
Well, I knew it was a ranunculus, but I didn't know, I had just never seen the flower form like that before.
No, I've not seen a multi-petaled one either. Beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it's very unusual. It's eye-catching. You know, it just makes you reach for your camera right away.
Seems quite robust. It seems a little bit bigger diameter. I don't know, maybe it's just my imagination.
Yes, no, you're right. It does look robust. And this is a slime mold, which we saw at 6th Lake. And Lisa Prue told me what the common name was, and I think I have it written down somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it. But it's Lycogala epidendrum, and it's often seen. It changes color as it develops, and it can be brown as well as lighter color than this pink. But this was quite. I had not seen that one either before, so I obviously need to get out of my home property and explore the rest of Nova Scotia.
That particular one is called wolf's milk slime.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Wolf's milk slime.
My fungus book doesn't show the common name. It just tells you the scientific name. Now, this is another one, and I sent this photograph to Heather Drope, and I don't remember who else, too, in the Wildflora Society, and said, what is this? It was taken early June, and I had I recognized it, but I had no idea what the species was. Now, it could be several species. So it just happened that a couple of weeks after I took this photo, Eric and I went back to Briar, and I came up with this photo. It was the only that all of the ones I looked at had one bloom on it. And this one was taken near Whipple Point. But then I noticed in the main big bog meadow between the top of the road to Western Light and Western Light, quite a few of these. And they each had one flower out. Can somebody tell me what it is?
Lacera? Is it the Lacera?
Yeah.
I think this one is the north wind
Lacera. Yeah, but this was interesting because when Heather gave me at least one other name, and I said, yeah, it could be, but it just doesn't look right. And so the thing to do was to wait until it bloomed. It started to unfold. Anyway, so there's the
Lacera has really, really divided fine petals. Like they're almost like thread-like.
Yes, I know, because we have it growing here,
Mhm.
but I don't know what else this would be.
Well, it could
Did
be,
anybody suggest the, oh gosh, hang on one sec. I have pictures of that one as well. Club spur orchid.
No,
Not a
No, I
club
don't think
spur?
so.
no.
No, okay.
But this looks like Lacera to me. Now in Newfoundland, it's very strange because we have one that's really, really stringy, and we call that the mainland Lacera. And then we've got one that's a little bit like the one you're showing. And then we've got some that are really, really stubby, like almost kind of more like the purple psychodes. And it seems, though some people will not agree with you, that there's a Newfoundland variety that's very, very stubby and not at all stringy. So I think there's a lot going on with these guys.
I think you're right. Yeah.
It could, if you have purple fringe there, they do cross. The
Oh,
lesser
yes. Oh, yes,
crosses.
they do. And
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
and that could be what's happening there.
no,
too.
no, well, that's there too. And they tend to be more of a sort of a weird pinkish, strange
Yeah.
color.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it the ones that are across do have a shorter fringe to them.
Not here.
Oh,
Ours are sometimes stringier than the other ones.
I think
I think
it-
these are just a big mishmash, to be honest.
the lesser purple fringe does
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah.
But anyway, there.
Okay.
A lot of varieties we have here.
Wasn't long after that we were there. We were on Briar again. In fact, it may be of that time. And we have Pogonia ophioglossoides and Calopogon tuberosus here that were really quite. This was the Calopogon was unbelievable. It was a deep magenta color. So, and that's how it looks on my screen when I'm not giving a presentation. But here it's very faded. It's almost purplish. Anyway, they just put the two on the same page because it was pretty exciting to see all that orchid. There must be 9 or 10 orchids that come through from June until October on Briar Island. It's just amazing. There's this parade of orchids. And everybody knows what that is. It's not very far from our place. It's Guillaume-Peckii again. And there is a bog restoration project going on there. Nick Hill is heading that, and he's been at it for 5 or 6 years now. They have, way back in the 50s, the bog became an experiment for growing blueberries, and manpower, so to speak, dug these trenches so that the water would drain into them and leave a dry bog on the top. Well, that never really went anywhere. And what happened was that the geese, the gulls nested in there, and invasive species came in, and Nick could see that this was probably possible that could change the water regime there, which he did. And just amazing, within a couple of years, you could see a difference. And this one was all to get this disjunct from New Hampshire. Well, really the closest one, aside from one patch in the bog on Long Island, southern part of Long Island, is New Hampshire in the mountains. So we're very fortunate to have that. And Nick's real drive here was to restore the habitat for Guillaume-Peckii, I think, and you should all come and see it sometime. It's really quite a magnificent switch over, and how fast it's happened. This was taken at Sixth Lake as well. I think it is Lycopodium obscurum, but maybe someone can correct me on that. But now it's called Dendrolycopodium obscurum. have to put the dendro in because it does look like a tree. And the lycopodium refers to these little ones. And I noticed this, I think that the leaf description, I didn't bring any part of the plant home with me, so I couldn't measure and see how they set on the stems or the branches. I just thought I'd throw in a couple of mosses. And this one is what we, for a long time now, I've been calling Magellanicum, Sphagnum magellanicum. But the type specimen for the real Sphagnum magellanicum is in the Straits of Magellan. So it's a South American sphagnum. And so the experts went together and got busy, and it's now split into Sphagnum medium and Sphagnum divinum. And I can't tell you what this is. This is just a photograph that I had. There's lots happening out there. It's quite amazing. And this is my last slide. And I had seen Bartramia before, but this was a particularly beautiful specimen. I blew this up so that you could see the individual sporophytes here. These little brown ones here are the mature sporophytes ready to spread their spores. But this whole plant occupied the bottom of it was growing profusely in a crack at the base of a quartzite bedrock ridge in Menamkeag, in Lake Menamkeag, outside in Lunenburg County. And it's a wonderful spot. There are 4 of these ridges, and the one that's closest to the trail in has a plethora of different species of liverworts and mosses that I'm just working on now, collecting and working on the identification. So that's my slideshow. Thank you. Any questions?
And just for your information, that green pitcher plant, if you want to look it up, it's considered to be a form or forma, Heterophylla, Phylla.
Heterophylla.
Yeah, you
Okay.
probably find it under that.
Okay. Thank you. That's good.
The pink of those beautiful pink bog orchids, what month were those photos taken? When were they in bloom?
Let's see. Oops.
You recall? Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Late June.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Yeah. It has something to do with my slideshow in a minute. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Late June or early July, you see these out at Shabukto Head.
Oh, really? Oh, that's right. Yes.
Shirley McIntyre is asking, where is Sixth Lake?
I think Bob can tell us better than that. But it's near Lake Jordan. It's near
Sort of
in the
south
same-
and west of Lake Rosignol.
Rossignol. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole connection of lakes in there, and
Hopefully
we visited 2 of them.
Mhm.
I'll mention
You
that
were
a bit
saying-
when I do my slides. Yeah.
I was asking, you said that the GM was on Long Island near your place?
No, that was on Briar,
Okay, that's what I thought, yeah.
but there is one. Jeannie Proof discovered it in the southern part of Long Island,
That's right
It's-
near Harris Lake there, Charlie.
Harris Lake. Yes,
I'm
that's right.
Yeah, I'll show that one as well a bit.
Yeah,
But apparently that's a different variety.
yeah, Harris Lake is really on Digby Neck, not on Long Island.
But yeah, I said that down, yeah, the southern end of Long Island. Yeah. I haven't seen it. I gather that property has been sold. And Ginny didn't seem to think that anyone would build on it because it's in a bog. It's in a very wet. Have you been there, Jeff?
I've been there quite a bit. That's where most of the times I've seen that the GM is there. And
Oh.
in the woodland in behind, there's some wonderful things in the in the woodland in behind towards St. Mary's Bay there. But yeah, it's a lovely spot, and I think that there's lots of acres there that was for sale and did sell. So that was
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, well, I think she tried to get Nova Scotia Nature Trust to buy it, or NCC, and
Yeah,
And then-
it was NCC and we didn't get it. Someone put a bid in that we couldn't match, so we didn't get
oh,
it.
really? Yeah, I guess you can't afford them all.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all I have.
Yeah,
And,
just if you're still there, just one more little quick comment on your Lacera.
yes,
Yeah, that picture. And somebody was talking about the hybrid between Lacera and Psychodes
mhm.
that makes a hybrid that's called Andrewsii. Andrews hybrid. So here's the problem. Around near St. John's on the east coast of Newfoundland, one of the best orchid bogs anywhere in the area is someplace called Little Soldiers Pond. If you're ever in near St. John's, go to Little Soldiers Pond.
Okay,
Anyway, and it has Andrewsii, the Lacera Psychodes cross, supposedly. There's only one problem. There's lots of Lacera there. There's no Psychodes that anybody's found for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of that bog. And yet these hybrid Andrewsii supposedly keep popping up. So go figure.
sometime back in the ancient history,
Yeah.
millennia ago.
Yeah. But anyway, they're a puzzle, those guys.
No, that's good. I'm glad to know that. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, you ready to go?
Okay, yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Jeff. I live in Digby, and I have some slides I call unexpected flowers. I don't have access to most of my photos from the last 20 years right now, so I did find some photos in the last couple months to share, last several months. So we'll go with that. Just need to start the slideshow. There, my slow little computer's ready to roll. Okay.
Can you go full screen? I think you're only getting half a screen.
Okay, on my computer, it's full screen.
Yeah, well, when you click the window, the Zoom window, immediately before this popped up, it seemed like that wasn't maximized, that screen.
I'm seeing a full screen on my computer.
Oh, all right, then maybe it's just me. Okay, carry on.
Okay. I'll do what I can here. So let me just go back. Oh, unexpected flowers. So these are, as I say, photos mostly from late in the summer and beyond this past year. And so I picked some photos that interested me because when I see something that's out of season going on, and there was even an iNaturalist project about late blooming flowers, it catches my eye, and so I take some photos. But this was what I would call an early bloom. This was and I can't remember right now where I took this photo and saw this shrub, this witch hazel all in bloom, but it was at the end of August.
Oh.
Seemed to me pretty early, still all in leaf. I'm used to thinking about it maybe blooming in October, so it was kind of funny to see that, I thought. Here's one of these little pink orchids, which I saw. It seems to me I didn't take notes about all these. I was on a boggy edge of a lake, headed down towards Bridgewater somewhere, and on the number, I forget what highway, but anyway. But it was past the season for these to be blooming, and you could see seed pods. But then this one was blooming, but it was September the 3rd. So we've probably all seen things really out of season and out of sync that just kind of randomly are happening, whether they're late or they're early. So it always catches my eye, and you've probably experienced some of the same things. So this is an unexpected experience. This is a picture of a group of hikers headed out in early September this past year to walk around Bear Island, which is at the mouth of the Bear River. So it's in Bear Island is probably Digby County. Anyway, it's at the borderline with Annapolis County on Indianapolis Basin. And at nice low tides, you can this gravel bar opens up as the tide goes out, and you can walk out and walk around the island. And best not to do that when the gulls are really hatching and young and so forth, and the cormorants. But anyway, this was September, good time to go around. And you're going to expect on this gravel to see the usual seashore plants growing in the gravel around the high tide line among the seaweed and stuff, aren't you? Well, one of the things I found this day was this plant growing up among, as you can see, coming out of the dried seaweed at the top of the beach, a tomato plant.
Yeah.
Now, this was September. It was just blooming. I didn't go back to see if it got a fruit before the high tide or the cold got it. Anyway, I thought, how did a tomato plant grow at the top of the beach on Bear Island in the summertime? But anyway, there it was. I had to take some photos. Better growing tomato plant than some of the ones in my garden, really. This kind of thing catches my eye too, and I watched for this summer in the fall and saw a few plants in a few places around Digby. This is a painted trillium plant, and I saw some in the spring too. That, you know, once in a while they'll come up in fours instead of the typical threes. You see the four leaves, you know, there were four sepals, and I assume four petals. I've seen them in bloom with four petals this year. And so this is just in the September time to see one of these trilliums. And I'd like to know, it'd be interesting to know how many of you have seen a trillium that had four parts, you know. I've seen some with two also. The bloom just have two, kind of misformed. But this kind of thing catches my attention too. Traveling up and down a trail in a hiking trail at Gulliver's Cove near Digby, and coming down the steep woods, gravelly woods road, someone had bush hogged or whatever, trimmed the shrubs and the bushes along the edge, including all these alders, and then they'd grown up vigorously during the season. But you look and take a look at the main shoots here, and this happened on a few of these bushes here that were growing up from the root fast and quick, as alders will do, but happen to be coming up with leaves in pairs opposite each other, other than the alternate. You see some of the smaller branches in these photos have the always alternate leaves up the stem of an alder, but then there's these few meristems that came up, and the leaves were coming off in pairs, which seems so odd. I think it's just a random thing that happens in the bud embryo as it appears. And you know, we all see things like this too. This is the end of November in a ditch in town in Digby, a nice largely lupin, I think, which is a beautiful planted weedy thing, I guess, in a way. And then I saw this this mustardy thing, I guess, a jointed charlock, or however we say that. This is start of December. These must have come up late, and we're trying to bloom. So these are my little oddball pictures I found at the end of the year.
That's the evening. That's the evening primrose, I think, your last one.
Oh, maybe it is. Yeah. Anyway, December 3rd. I thought that was cool.
Dave McCorkadale here in Cape Breton, he did an iNaturalist project this year about late bloomers, because they're everywhere. And I contributed what I found, and at the end of it, I had 13 species flowering that shouldn't be flowering between November the 1st and December 31st. So it was really an unusual year for late bloomers. I didn't have primrose. I had dianthus, I had euphrasia.
Yeah.
It was remarkable, and in the most unusual places, late bloomers. It was a year for late blooming flowers. Yeah.
There's one, I mean, people in horticulture and gardening plants are looking at this stuff too. And in town here in Digby, there's one large forsythia on a street corner that usually, you know, in December, as the leaves, or maybe some leaves still hanging on, will have a few blooms. Sometimes, you know, it's
crazy.
Yeah.
I had mentioned this project to somebody else, and she told me that she found some Epigea repens flowering in early December. Yeah, I thought that was really strange.
Hmm.
Yeah, a weird year, 2021. Thank you, Jeff. That was great.
Any other thoughts or questions or experiences like that?
I'm
Jeff,
sorry?
yeah, Jeff John here. I have a sneaking suspicion in the back of my mind that there may be an October blooming witch hazel. I know most of them are really, really super early, but you might want to check some of the stuff from the Western US. I think I think there is one October bloomer, but I may be wrong.
Well, I think of our local one here in Nova Scotia as October. And so when I saw this one in August, with all the green leaves lush on it, it caught my attention.
Yeah.
A lot of the ones in horticulture I see in the province, different colors, bloom like early in the spring. I think that's what those hybrids do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in St. John's, we've got some in the park. I think they're the Ozark Mountain variety, and I mean, they're blooming end of February.
Wow.
Really amazing. No leaves, just blooms, and they're quite gorgeous. But I think there is one October one somewhere. But if I can track it down, I'll try and let somebody know.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I'd have to look at my pictures, but I believe I found some in June as well. Not June, but August, the witch hazel.
Oh, really? Okay.
I found some there were lots of plants that flowered at the wrong time. I remember finding strawberries in November and stuff like that. It was
Yeah.
just
Well, as long as
weird.
there's enough of them, then they can self-pollinate, I guess. Okay, I'm going to move along. So on my schedule, I'm next. So here I come. I'm going to repeat a few things here, it looks like. So this is our annual trip that we seem to have to Digby Neck in the, this case was in April. And the spath and flower and all that. And then we end up going back in that area or close to it in July. So I just wanted to compare how the plant changes from just the flower to the large leaves that are almost like a hosta, and the scale of it. And just, I still find it a fascinating plant. Next up, so on that same expedition to see the skunk cabbage in April, we went into a bog, and something I'd been looking for the longest time and just had never been able to train my eye to see it. But Jeff, of course, picked it out right away. It's curly grass fern. And you can see there on the left how it isn't the easiest thing to see, but that time of year was really the only green thing in the bog. So once I realized to just look for little green things, and then I also caught the little toothbrush shaped sporangia on it that kind of bobbed around to the wind, then it suddenly stood out, and it was relatively, I wouldn't say common, but it was fairly frequent in little hollows beside hummocks. It seemed to be where it liked. And that's the Eastern Mountain Avens in the one that's on Digby Neck that Ginny very kindly took us to see. She had mentioned to me about this one spot that she had located, and I asked her for some directions, and so she offered to take me there. So we got together with Jeff and Charlie and her daughter Lisa, and went to see it in late July, which was really a bit late for it. And as you can see there on the right, there's just a few blooming, but it's quite a lovely flower, and I'm glad to finally have the chance to see it, particularly in that location. And on the same trip, when we went further down towards East Ferry, came across this guy, which is it's a burdock, but it's the giant burdock, which is Arcticum lapa, and that's something that hadn't really been clearly identified in Nova Scotia, according to Sean Blaney anyway, when I posted it. It's since been found, I think, in about 2 or 3 other places, but it's a big plant. That on the right there, that's probably about 7-8 feet tall, that plant. And then on the other side of things, really small in the gravel, was something, again, I wasn't familiar with, but you may, and it's called carpetweed. And it's apparently one of these plants that is native further south and has been making its way further north every year, and got here about 100 years ago. It's also the only representative of its family, Maluka Asia. I can never handle Latin very well. Anyway, it's the only representative of this whole family in Canada. Now, when we went, so this is around the trip we took to Lake Rosignol. And this is, as we were just talking about, towards Six Lake and that, this is because I had noticed an iNaturalist that there's this big hole in Nova Scotia, kind of the south and to the west of Lake Rosignol, where there really was no postings of any kind. And so I just got curious to what was there, if there's anything different, what kind of any of the Atlantic coastal plain stuff or what. So I decided to try and get there. So that was early in the summer. I started trying to, and I discovered that the area was gated by lands and forests, and that although you could take a canoe in and stuff, but to get in by vehicle, you needed their permission, and they weren't really willing to give it. So it took me quite a while to get in there. And this is sort of just outside of the gate. We saw lots of poison ivy, and this is just climbing. I'd never seen it climbing this high before. You can see up this telephone pole and way up into this spruce here. So it wasn't until middle of October that I actually got the permission for us to go in and see the area that I wanted. And again, just outside the area, this is something that I had sort of heard about but hadn't really seen, which is this plant's called cudweeds. And there's two kinds here. The one you get, there's a cudweed you get in your garden, which is this very low sprawling plant with little wee flowers on it. And that's sort of an introduced species. It's a garden weed. But these are two native species that were all considered in the same genus, Nephalium, until recently, of course. And now it's in Pseudonephalium. And in iNaturalists, they call these things rabbit tobaccos, but I can't find anybody else that calls them that. And then when you go to the individual plants, the one on, they're now calling them everlastings, which confuses it even more because they are not the plant that we call the pearly everlasting, which is very common around the province, is in the genus Anaphyllus. So these are in the genus Pseudonephalium, or Pseudonephalium, I guess is a better pronunciation. And the difference is the one on the left is the sweet everlasting, and I just realized I didn't put the Latin name down here. Sorry about that. And that one we found just by the dam by Lake Rosignol there. And then the one on the right is McCoon's everlasting, which is one we found on the roadway just as we approached into the area by the Mercy River. And you can sort of see the difference on the leaves here. The sweet everlasting, the leaves are just attached to the base, but, or oops, sorry. And the McCoon's, they're dehiscent, which means the leaves are actually attached in part to the stem, and it's further. So anyway, it's different. And then on the bottom left there, you can see when we went back in October, we saw the same plant after it had bloomed and dispersed its seed, and it had these sort of look like flowers, but it's actually the seed heads that had dispersed. And this is a hybrid aster. We're talking about hybrids. This one's called Blake's aster, and it's a hybrid between a bog aster and a world wood aster. And they're both, when they renamed the aster genus into Symphotrichium and all those other things, there's a few of them became I can never get my pronunciation right. Acclemina, I guess. Acclemina, okay. Thank you. So Nemoralis is the bog aster, which is in the background there. I could not for the life of me find any world asters roundabout, but if you're familiar with the world aster, it's very much like this plant, except it's squat and the leaves are in a whorl and just has the white flowers coming up. Well, the hybrid grows upright and you see the white flowers growing upright like this. So that's the Oclamina blakei, which is the hybrid there that we saw along the roadside. Now, the other thing that kind of interested me was the chain fern. So this is the Virginia chain fern that we saw in a lake nearby, Woodwardia virginica. And it sort of looks like a cinnamon fern, but the leaves, the fertile fronds are very different than a cinnamon fern, and it has these sporangia like this. Now, the only other plant in the Woodwardia family, in fact, in the whole fern family called Bleconacea here in Nova Scotia, is called the netted chain fern or the dwarf chain fern. And that we saw quite a bit of. And again, this is a plant that I had never seen before and is considered vulnerable in Nova Scotia. But in this particular area, in the south to west of Lake Rosignol, we found it growing in most of the river bottom areas, sort of the floodplain areas around these rivers. And even though it's, to me, I find it amazing that it's considered in the same genus because it looks very different. Looks, the leaves look much more like a sensitive fern, and the fertile fronds are very different. The sporangia to me look different, but I guess the netting of the leaf must be similar enough. If you go back to the Virginia, I mean, there does seem to be a bit of similarity there. My guess is once you get to the microscopic level on the spores and that's probably the giveaway. But it just surprised me that these two species were in the same genus. Now, this is something just came across. This is about bulbils, which are these reproductive structures. So this one you're probably fairly familiar with in swamp candles, Lismatia terrestris, that often puts out these reproductive structures called bulbils that are basically a way to clone itself. They're not sexual. And anyway, so when we were in Lake Jordan, actually, or Jordan Lake rather, I came across this rush that I couldn't identify. And the only thing I could see were these looked like seed heads. When I looked at them, and that does not look like a rush. And it puzzled me for the longest time until I read that the brown fruited rush, Juncus paleocarpus, is known to grow bulbils. So again, non-sexual reproductive structures, and that's what I was seeing here. So that surprised me. I didn't know rushes did that. This was a club moss that I hadn't seen before, called the blue club moss, Diphysiastrum tristachium, blue ground cedar is probably the better way to call it, or blue. Anyway, this was when we went to our the Nova Scotia Wildflower Society. Charlie took us up a hike to Labrador Castle, and this is just off to the side of the trail. And they're quite a bluish cast, which I had never seen in a club moss before. So my last slide is my mystery plant. So we talked about perhaps showing a mystery plant. So in this case, this is a mystery tree. Now I looked at this, and this is when we went to Maguma Falls in mid-November, and is on the way of the trail. So I looked at the bark and trying to figure it out, and I thought this is probably a sugar maple because it sort of looked like it had some plates on the bark and stuff. But I looked up and it had these like growths or something up on the twigs, and it almost reminded me like when ash gets like a fungus or something. I couldn't figure out what that was. So anybody got some thoughts as to what they think this tree is?
I would say yellow birch.
Well done. So that's what it looked like when I looked at the twigs up top. That's what it looked like. But when you look at the entire tree, there's no sign of that birch bark until way, way, way up near the top. So
actually, there is a little bit on the other photo at the bottom. You can see it at the roots.
You think?
On the left root, I find. Yeah, I think there.
Okay, well, you're probably right. Anyway, for me, I'd never seen a birch that had this little of the birch bark on it. And also, I mean, it's a pretty hefty trunk on it. It was about 4.5 feet maybe in diameter at chest height, and went up, very, didn't diminish in size much until near the top. It clearly had broken off or something. So I think this is quite an old tree. So anyway, there you go. That's my presentation.
John here, just a couple of comments. One, your curly grass fern.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, have you noticed, I don't know how many times you've seen it around Nova Scotia, but do you notice an association with huckleberry, the Gay-Lussacia, what used to be Dumosa? Down here, every single time that I've seen curly grass fern, it's been in association with huckleberry. So now when we want to show somebody curly grass fern, we look for huckleberries and then muck around underneath, and there's your curly grass ferns.
You're talking about like the bog huckleberry, right? The low one, the low.
Yeah, the sort of the light colored flower one, not the red flower one.
So I can't say that was true in our case, Jeff, because Jeff's the curly grass fern expert to me. He can find them when no one else can.
That's an interesting connection to hear about, because certainly in the bog there where we were seeing it down the neck, Bigby Neck, there's certainly that little bog huckleberry is there. I know it's there. I'm just trying to think, where else have I seen a curly grass fern? I've not seen it all.
Twain's Bog.
Where's that?
Oh yes.
Port Latour.
Yes, yeah.
Twain's Bog. You find it around the Huckleberry Mounds there.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Sometimes
that's very helpful for when I want to look for it some more. I'm going to keep.
Yeah. There's a few other possibles, like screwwort, Bartonia tends to be around it, and our little yellow-eyed grass, the God, the name's escaping me. It's iris. One of the irises sometimes is around as well.
Diffusum or Montana, one of those two.
Montana.
Yeah,
Montana. So they're less definite associations, the Bartonia and the iris, but definitely the light colored huckleberry for sure.
Well,
Can't miss.
What we noticed that it was in little depressions always, like it seemed to have a little microclimate that it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's like in Newfoundland, in parts of Newfoundland, the west coast and the south coast, sometimes you'll see your partridge berry. And in Newfoundland, if you want to find it, you look for ATV tracks going across bogs, and it's usually in the ATV tracks. So the other quick point is that your blue ground cedar,
yes,
clubmouth. I know that every book you'll read, it says that it's blue tinged or blue shades to it. Interestingly, I have never, and that means never, seen any Tristachyium in Newfoundland that are blue tinged ever. They are just ordinary color, and I have looked and looked for the blue tinged ones, and they're not here.
Well, I'll take you to this clump someday.
Yeah. No.
This was
I'd like
very
to see
blue. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting that all the books say they're blue tinged, and almost like that's the main field markers on it. Well, no, not here. Anyway, never mind.
Okay. So shall we move on? Doug, it's your turn.
Yeah. How many are after me? I don't want to
Just Mary.
Just Mary.
Not Jared, just Mary. Mary.
Yes, Mary. Well, there'll be time for Mary. Just on that curly grass fern, yeah, I think that's where I've seen it too in the various locations. Is it's always in the spots where it's a little bit open, a little bit wetter. Often has been remarked where ATVs have traveled before, and it makes sense because it's such a tiny plant. It's unlikely to come up under the heavier cover within bogs. So that just seems to make sense.
One of the things I came across was interesting is apparently it's also found in Peru, up in the Andes. And he's done a spore match and everything and is convinced it's the same plant.
Wow.
And, so then the question is, well, where else may it be that people just have never noticed or looked for it? I don't know.
They don't have huckleberries. They can't find it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay. Hang on a sec here. Let me make sure I got you. Yeah, there we go. Yep, it's working.
All right. So I'm going to start I took a trip to the Okanagan where I have family at Thanksgiving. And I just have a couple of shots from here, but this is very South Okanagan near a Soyuz, very close to the US border. In fact, there's a barbed wire fence that runs through the middle of this natural area that is actually the international border, which is pretty interesting. Very arid. Apparently it's not an actual desert by strict definition, but a very arid landscape with a lot of shrubs, not too many trees until you get in the higher slopes. You can see it up in here. It's a lot of lodgepole and ponderosa pine, but down on the lower slopes, mostly shrubby and very sandy as well. This is rubber rabbit.
You're not sharing the big photo somehow.
Where are you seeing the photo though?
No,
We
well,
are
we're
seeing
seeing
a
the
list of-
folder. Yeah,
Sorry?
we're seeing the folder.
Just the
The
thumbnails.
folder. Okay. Hang on. What do you see now?
Same.
Just seeing the folder?
Yeah, it may be when you do the screen sharing, do you have to choose which window to share?
Yeah.
Try turning it off and on again, the screen sharing maybe. Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
there.
Okay.
There.
All right, here we go. So I'll let you have another look at this one because I like how you can see the horses going through the Western influence. Rubber rabbit brush is one of the really common shrubs in this area and blooming profusely in around Thanksgiving, at least it was this year. And a prickly pear, Opuntia, they're everywhere as well. You have to be careful because they will go right through your leather boot. It was surprising. I would sometimes feel something poking at me through my boot, and it was one of these guys. And that's how they get around. They grab onto passing creatures like people and that move around those little pads. I threw this in because I know that there are many of us in the group appreciate sedges, and I'm one of them. And this is one of my favorite sedges, folliculata, which is, I think, really quite beautiful. When you take the time to look at sedges and really look at them closely, they're really quite beautiful. And they're kind of nondescript, from a distance, and generally not much more than greenish or greenish yellow. But structurally, there's a lot going on there. I find them really fascinating. I threw this in. Anyone take a guess at this? It's gold thread, coptis. Obviously, I made that into a monochrome image. I just liked the way the flowers popped like stars.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can see the little staminodes on it, the little spoon shaped things around.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're like the lower one in particular, these little
Oh, these
spoons.
guys, yes.
Yeah.
Now, Mary will certainly know about this one, as will some of you others. This is one of the more rarer plants in the province and an endangered species, ram's head lady slipper at Angevine Lake, where Mary has a property, and just by happenstance, so do I. And so I went to visit that. I went 2 weekends in a row. The first weekend, it was just still coming up, the flowers, and then the following weekend, there they were in full bloom. So that's quite a treat to see those. And then totally disjunct from the other locations in Nova Scotia, which are mostly around the Windsor area, associated with the very calcium-rich kind of gypsum soils. But there's a good patch of it here at Angevine Lake. And then just up the slope from there at Angevine Lake is this Hooker's orchid. Actually quite a few in the woods there. I think I counted over 25 plants when I was there. This was the first weekend in June. And some of you will remember the field trip we did, the annual field trip in 2019. I guess maybe the last one that was kind of a full-on traditional field trip with overnights and so on. That was in the Tatamagouche Pugwash area. And there's a section along the Wallace River there that is just a whole trove of really interesting stuff, including this one, which is blue vervain. It grows right along the roadside there, and very common in that stretch, and all along the Wallace River actually, and in the Wyle River. Dutchman's breeches also very common along the Wallace River. This one and the previous one, well, all these plants that are in here, I have a kind of a sentimental quality about, because I'm originally from Southern Ontario, where these kinds of spring flora, rich deciduous woods are very common. They're kind of like everywhere. That's what you see when you go into the woods in southwestern Ontario. Whereas here, of course, not nearly so much, and some of them are relatively common, but it's kind of scattered. And so it's a real treat to go to a place where you can see a lot of them in the same location. One of the other ones I saw that I don't have a photo of because I couldn't get a good one was blue cohosh, which is also growing here. And the hugest spread of bloodroot I've seen anywhere in my entire life, including southwestern Ontario. There's a whole hillside just full of bloodroot at that location. And I'm really curious to wonder how it ended up that way. This is along the same roadside. This is hemp dogbane. And not too far down on the same side of the road is its sister or brother, the spreading dogbane. So the two dogbanes are both in that same location along the road. And there's ironwood growing there as well, a tree this is the fruit, sometimes called hop tree, and you can see why. The fruit looks very much like hops. And I thought it was an opportune photo to get the ladybug messing around in there too. Probably one of the Asian ones though. And red baneberry. There's a white and a red baneberry. They're both actia. It's hard to tell the difference unless the fruit is out and you can see a red berry versus a white berry. But when you don't have the fruit, they're really hard to separate, except the red one, generally the flower is rounder. Whereas in the white one, it's a longer inflorescence instead of a rounder one like this. And clematis, Virgin's bower, grows in abundance along that same stretch of road. There's a happy little pollinator doing its work. This is nearby as well. This one I think is fairly common in Nova Scotia, Spring Beauty. But again, another one that I feel sentimental about because it's very common back where I spent most of my years before coming to Nova Scotia. This is also along the Wallace River. And Herb Robert, this is in Cape Breton near Keynes Mountain. So kind of a gypsum area, very rich soils. I've not seen this anywhere else except in Cape Breton. I'm sure it's elsewhere in Nova Scotia, but I've only ever seen it in Cape Breton. I don't know if others can say where else they've seen it in the province. This is down the other end of the province near Yarmouth at Lobster Bay, big salt marsh. That island in the back there is a Nature Conservancy of Canada property. And you have to walk across this salt marsh to get to it, which is easy enough, except it's completely infested with mosquitoes. And you have to dance around a little bit to avoid falling into one of these. But just a beautiful landscape, really. I just love this, the rushes and the sedges and the grasses that are in there. And also all in the bottom here is sea lavender. So it's not at all related to the kind of ornamental, or what I'll call the domestic lavender, but superficially resembles it. It has purple little flowers. You can sort of get an idea of them here. But it's a coastal plant. It's a marine coastal plant. This one's interesting. This is pineweed, and this is down near Indian Fields Provincial Park. So in southwest Nova Scotia, just southwest of the Tobiatic area. and a new property that Nature Conservancy got this year that we call Upper Ohio, that is adjacent to Indian Fields Provincial Park. And this is along the roadside there where I found it, and couldn't figure out what it was at first. And then did the investigation and subsequently learned that it's pineweed, and is actually little known from Nova Scotia, or was little known, that there was really only one location that was kind of atlased or is in the flora guide, but was fairly common along the roadsides here. So that was an interesting find. It looks a lot like the Hudsonia, like the pine golden heather. And we've seen this one already, the Marsh St. John's or Triadenum. And this one in standing water, I think, in my experience, you don't see them so much with their feet this wet, but I think in this case, it was after a heavy rain and the shore had flooded a little more than it might usually. This is at Coal Pit Lake in Halifax. We all know this one, of course, but I just liked the cluster of them. I thought it was very photogenic and very purple, as we expect them to be, not yellow. And here we are with this. So this is Blephara glottis. So if you look at the, the fringes on these petals, they're not quite as fringy as the ones that Anne was showing. So I don't know if hers is Blephara glottis or not, but this one is. This is also on that Upper Ohio property. And I think that's it. So I think you'll have to turn me off there, Bob.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. I found it. Okay.
There you go.
So that was my whirlwind tour from Okanagan to Nova Scotia.
So Doug, it's Mary here. I don't know if you can see me.
Yeah.
That Wallace River site, if you had been a member of Wild Flora Society just a couple of years before you joined, I actually gave a presentation about that
Okay.
site and how I discovered it and what my theory is about. And I still have that PowerPoint presentation, so I can share that with you at some point. But
Yeah.
it was absolutely fascinating. And kind of, when you see my presentation, there's a connection there.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about. Actually, and I forgot to add, the other really fantastic thing there is the Canada lily. But this year it was absent. I checked weekend after weekend, and I was there for stretches of time. I never saw the Canada lily blooming there this year. So that's a bit of a mystery to me.
I think I went and checked and I did see it blooming, but not as nicely as usual.
It must not have been as much of it either.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, thanks.
Okay, Mary, I think it's all yours. Oh,
Okay,
you know what?
so- What's that?
Oh, I thought we lost your voice, but you're there. Okay.
Okay, and now, yeah, this is kind of weird. It doesn't look like how. Exit full screen, maybe? Okay. Can you guys see anything?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, hang on. Share.
Okay.
You can see something?
Yep.
Okay, and can you see something starting to look like a presentation yet? Yes?
Rediscovering the
you
sacred.
see?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, here we go. And I'm the last one, so you don't have to mute. If somebody's too loud, we will say something to you and you can interrupt me if you want, but let's keep the questions kind of short so that we can get through it. So my presentation is called Rediscovering the Sacred, and it's a shortened version that I'm presenting to you. I do have the whole thing there, and if I go through it, we might get through the whole thing. We'll see. So I gotta get you out of my corner. Somebody just a second. I have somebody blocking part of my screen here. How do I get the pictures of people out of the corner there? Anyway,
You have an option in the upper right of those photos of people to do various things, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
View up in the corner.
Are you guys seeing some pictures of people as well as my presentation?
I'm only seeing one person at a time, and it's you.
Okay, good. As long as it's not blocking what you're seeing. It's blocking what I'm seeing, but that's all right.
It is also blocking what we are seeing.
Is it?
You
Yes.
have to, each person has to adjust their computer the way they want to see it. There should be a thing. at the very-
I think Mary's screen shows or on our screen shows a white stripe on the left.
Okay.
Yes, I'm not done yet. So
Oh, I see.
I'm going to start now. Sorry about that. So I did a lot of driving this year, and it was propelled by grief. I was armed with my iPhone and Google Maps and iNaturalist, and I trekked out as often as I could to document cut blocks within about 2 hours of Tatamagouche in time to post a comment before the deadlines. So after, we had several presentations in the spring from experts telling us how we could stop some of these cuts. And using that information, I was looking for rare and endangered species. And these red blocks, if you're wondering what those are, those were posted cut blocks that I got to this past year. More than 2 contiguous acres of old growth forest. I was looking for that. Proximity to protected areas. And as some of you know, that was happening. And by the way, finding old growth forest didn't necessarily stop a cut, as you no doubt know. Wetlands are not supposed to be cut, but they are being. And rare and endangered landscape types. And hoped against hope that my findings would make a difference. So I got out there during the comment periods. I did my best just trekking through all these plots, and then I did my comments. And of course, while flora folk, you try and say that fast, like us, are notorious for noticing nothing but what is beneath our feet. So I had to learn to train myself to look up and to notice everything around me, and also to listen, because we had to be, checking for birds as well. And I don't know my birds, I'm not a birder, but thank goodness the iNaturalist app has a recording feature on it. So I could record things that I heard and post them to iNaturalist, and people helped me. And as I continued my lonely travels out to remote parts of Nova Scotia to really, let's be frank, bear witness to impending ecocide, it slowly dawned on me that I was not in fact walking alone. This is true. At first, I thought it was simply the squirrels and chickadees and ravens that were helping me with my task. And I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. I would be about to give up and a squirrel would make a noise, or a chickadee and a raven. And it was almost like they were insisting, come this way, come this way. And I would find something. But I was wrong. It wasn't just them. I wasn't alone out there. And just as we try to provide direction, support, and protection to our children and hope they'll pass these values along, so too has a sacred legacy been left on the land by the Onug, the people of Mi'kmaq. Excuse my pronunciation, anybody who's a native speaker. And thanks to Donald Marshall's trial and the resulting Mi'kmaq Nova Scotia Canada framework, which is the Made in Nova Scotia process, since 2007, there has been another way to trigger a halt to deforestation. So I'm going to give you an example. It's a very recent one that I went to less than a month ago. So it's a good one because it really has some interesting features to it. So the location, this is a locator map for you guys, is between Amherst and Spring Hill. It's over here. And this is another site nearby that I walked. These green marks are my iNaturalist postings. The actual site is here, and it goes further. I usually can never get right into the whole, I can't walk the whole things. I mean, this one, for example, this cut block was almost 200 acres, and I visited it twice. I went 2 days, and they want to clear cut 200 acres. Okay, this is the prescription for these 4 cut blocks. Even a shelter wood is actually a clear cut. What they do is they take the marketable wood and leave some big trees, and then they come back in a couple of years later and they cut down all the rest of the trees. So it was to be completely clear cut. And the comment deadline on this particular site was less than a month ago. And this was when I visited the site. So this is my site example for you guys. And here's my little title here, Walking with Onug near Little Forks landfill. And if you're wondering what the heck is Onug, Onug is the people, and that's what the Mi'kmaq actually call themselves. Mi'kmaq means friends, and Onug, which is what they call themselves, means the people. So before I set out on my field trips, I use my iPhone Google Maps app to pin the cut block boundaries, because that will track me and I'll know when I'm actually inside the cut block. I also use this app to plan my driving route. And I also look at the aerial photographs to see what's going to be the most interesting way to hike in. So for example, this particular site, I parked my car here. And the reason I did that, I could have parked anywhere up here because I had to hike into the site, but was because I could see from the aerial photograph that this was old growth hardwood. And even though that was not actually in the cut block is down here, and you can see there's old growth hardwood here. I knew that this would be an interesting way to hike in. And I might find some cool stuff. This darker stuff here is almost invariably black spruce bog when you see dark stuff like that. And when it's this thick, it's probably old, but maybe not old growth. In this case, access to the area was through a service road into a huge, active and expanding landfill. Humongous, unbelievably big. So I had to drive right through that. And it's just off the map here. So there's a lot of destruction that's already happened in this area. And I drove past it, and I parked my little car on the roadside. Probably I parked it right here because I hopped out and immediately tucked my head into the woods on both sides of the road looking for features. Well, I wasn't disappointed. I started taking photographs right away using my iPhone iNaturalist app. And the very first thing I saw was that the Onug had left me a trail. So we need to talk about trail trees. And one of our members had introduced the idea of trail trees at one of our earlier talks in the spring, and it had been kind of ticking away in my head. So here's a good example of a trail tree. This was the first trail thing I saw when I poked my head here into the old growth that was on this side of the road. And this particular trail tree has a low branch. So trail trees can tell you about seasonality. If it's a low branch, then you know that this trail was not used, or this particular part of the trail was not used in the wintertime, because you wouldn't be able to see that if you had a good snow, which they would have had in the good old days. This is another type of trail tree that maybe most of you are more familiar with. This type of trail tree was the kind where they would have tethered it somehow, and then as the trees sprouted up, as a little branches sprouted up, they would cut these off and trim it. Okay, so that's probably another type that you guys are more familiar with. And you can see that in this case, this horizontal strip is a little higher. So this one, definitely this trail could have been used in the winter. So let's translate the trail tree. And I'm not an expert on this, except that I have been following them. Okay, so when I first got out there, I was just kind of trying to figure out what do these trees mean? Do they mean something? And I had faith that they did, but I don't know about you guys, but I had been told that these branches point somewhere. And so at first I was kind of thinking, well, where is it pointing? Is it pointing in this way or is it pointing in that way? Well, it turns out that that is actually a completely wrong interpretation. These are actually path trees, and it makes complete sense when you think about it. So these are linear. And what you're doing is, if I'm standing over here, I have to be able to see this tree. I have to be able to see it from the last one. Okay. So if I'm to see it, if I need a direction, my direction has to be right through the middle of the fork. And that indeed is the case. When you follow these trees, you'll find that if I stand with my back to this tree, if I'm coming from this direction, I stand with my back to this tree, I will be able to see within my viewing distance the next tree. Okay, so if you're out in the woods and you come across a tree like this, have a look behind you, have a look in front of you, in between the forks. That's your path. The turn trees. The turn trees are really cool too. So you're coming along, you're following your linear tree, and you see a tree that has two different branches sticking out at different directions. So I'm coming along this way. Hope you can see my arrow. And I get to here and it's telling me stop. You'll be sorry if you keep going in this direction. There's a bog here. Make a little turn and we promise you we'll help you get over this wet patch. And sure enough, they do. So as I'm going along, I'm not only using these trees for direction, but I'm also noting the age, the species, the branching character, and the height of the cultural modification. So we already know why I'm looking at the height. That gives me seasonality. We know why we're looking at the branching character. That tells me my direction. We already kind of can guess, doesn't take too much to guess why I'm looking at the age. I want to know when is the minimum possible age that some cultural activity was going on in this area. Why do I want to look at the species? Well, it turns out that the species are very important as well, because you will often find as you're going through these trails that it'll be the same species that takes you along the whole path, even though that particular species may not normally grow in that particular ecology. So in fact, what these trail trees are showing us is that these not only were deliberately culturally modified, they were in fact probably planted. Somebody was maybe carrying an ash basket with a bunch of trees in it and going along and planting them. And the reason that I've come to this conclusion is because sometimes I would find that there had been plantings done at different ages and different species, marking the same trail. So maybe grandfather planted them 80 years ago and passed that knowledge on to his grandson, who then came along with a different species of tree and then planted a whole bunch of, let's say, balsam fir. Okay, it's really, really interesting and cool. Another type of tree that you will find are crossroad trail trees. So it will be like a path tree, but instead of having just one fork, you'll have another fork as well. So the branches will be opposite each other, but it'll be two trails intersecting. So that's a crossroad trail tree. And I have a picture here of also a multi-branch tree where several trails could terminate, but it might not be several trails. It might just be one trail. And when you have one trail terminating, so here you can see trail trees that are leading me here to this spot. When you have, and it was just one trail, when you have a whole bunch of branches all of a sudden coming out often it's the same species as is here, but usually it will be an older tree. It'll be a relic tree from perhaps the last time someone had planted the trail. That's what I would call an arrival tree. Okay, it's a tree that has all these branches coming out of it and it says, stop, stop, stop. Look, this is a sacred spot. Another type of tree that you will see are called I call them twist trail trees. And this is where two trails connect. It could be indicating a meeting spot. Often they're two different species, but not always. So here's one that has two different species twisting together. And here's one that has the same species twisting together. So I'm suggesting, I don't know if it's true, potentially grandfather maybe walked from one direction along the trail and met grandson coming this way, and they celebrated by twisting a tree. Could have been that. This could have been two lovers. I don't know, who knows? I'm guessing, but it was obviously something significant to the people that planted these trees. I just found another twist tree that was on a burial mound yesterday. So who knows? Another really important trail tree, are fording or portage trees. And you want to look for them on the coast, at rivers, streams, and wetlands. And usually they're very high branching for visibility. When I'm walking the trails and I get to a wetland or a stream, and if I can't find that fording tree, I'm in trouble. But what I have found is that if I've been following a trail tree mark route, all I have to do is hunt the ground for a deadfall trail tree. And invariably it's there, you can find it. And you can judge the best direction to cross the wetland by seeing where the break occurred and then looking for where the fork would have been when upright. And 9 times out of 10, once you get across, you'll find that welcoming tree on the other side. Okay, so this is interesting. Nice little, journey, but what's the importance of all this? Well, what if you find burial mound marker trees? Okay. So the First Nations people, when they buried their dead, they would often put something on the burial mound so that they could identify their kin. So they're actually burial marker trees that are on these burial mounds. They're not on every burial mound. If they're super old burial mounds, potentially the trail trees have died or fallen down. Unfortunately, because of clear cutting, a lot of these trail trees and these marker trees have been cut down. But archaeological features on Crown managed land, especially burial mounds, should trigger consultation before any cuts can happen. Okay, super important. I just want to mention here what this is. This is the backside of a whole line of burial mounds, and this is a road cut plan, tagging tape. So if you can stop a road going in, that's huge. Okay. Now, unfortunately, as you guys all know, no prior environmental nor archaeological assessment is required right now before deforestation. However, documented cultural features should be triggering consultation, okay? This is part of the Nova Scotia, the Mi'kmaq, Nova Scotia, Canada framework. Any documented cultural feature has to trigger consultation. However, our government has not shared the cultural archaeological feature layer of their database with ONUG, even though they have, the Mi'kmaq have been requesting it since at least 2007. Okay, so the province is hanging on to this information. So So the Mi'kmaq rights, and they're the folks that do the consultations. They've got about 600, almost 700 consultations going on right now, are making their own GIS database. Because they can't get this information from the province. And the province is not going to tell them, even though they're required to by law, if this stuff is on Crown managed land. Okay, so these folks are making their own database. Okay, so say I'm out there, you, Charlie, or Bob, or whatever, you're out there and you see a mound. How do you know it's a burial mound? Well, Charlie, guess what? If you see pink earth lichen on a damaged mound, it's very, very strong possibility that it could be a burial mound, because this particular type of lichen likes clay. And the way First Nations here in Nova Scotia and across Mi'kmaq buried their dead was flex burials, and they sat them in a certain direction, they piled them over with logs, and then they covered them. The bodies were covered in birch bark, and the hole, which was about 3 feet deep, was then covered in kind of like a teepee of wood, and then it was covered in clay. Okay, so here's an example of a damaged mound that I just saw. I think this must have been, this is one I saw yesterday, I think, and it had signs of clay in it. So the mounds are clay lined. So pink earth lichens also on the trail that goes in are very characteristic of some of these burial mound trails that I've seen. I suspect that they buried their dead, bringing clay with them, and then just kind of threw it on the road and eventually just continued doing that. The trail trees will be leading to or they'll be on the mounds. So if you're seeing trail trees and they're in the area and you're seeing mounds, that's a good sign that these are burial mounds. The age and the type of flora that's growing on these mounds is going to be different from the surroundings. So if you're looking at pit and mound, you're going to have a very rich flora that's going to grow up on that. Well, that's not going to happen on these birch bark line, clay line mounds. Okay, you've got something very different growing on them. You'll often find cherry growing on them and brambles, because the people would go and sit there and eat a little picnic and drop a cherry perhaps, and drop their raspberries and whatever it was they were picnicking on when they went to visit. There's also a pattern in the distribution of these types of mounds. So you're following a trail, you're seeing mounds, but then all of a sudden you get to high ground, and the mounds are there, but they're larger, more imposing. And you'll also see that they're larger whenever you get near a water course. So high status individuals perhaps were being buried there, or perhaps the high ground was just, really popular real estate and they buried more than one person up on the high ground. So that's another sign that these are probably burial mounds that you're seeing. Also cobbles. You'll see cobbles if there's a bit of erosion going on in the mounding. And of course, if there is enough damage, you'll see that they're lined with birch bark. And I have seen a few of them that you can actually see the birch bark jutting out. So that's the end of my short presentation. Is anybody interested in seeing 10 more slides, or shall we stop? It's up to you, Bob.
Well, I can go for more. It's really up to the rest of the crowd too. Let's get everybody on here.
Maybe we'll let people go.
I would just suggest that if people have had enough, they can log off. And if not, we'll just keep going if everybody's okay.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm not going to be offended if someone wants to log off at this point. All right.
I want to see the rest, Mary.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So what if you're also finding cultural plants and other archaeological features? So for example, at this site, this little fork site that going back to the beginning of my talk, I was finding old growth black cherries in the old growth area. Okay, so that's a cultural plant. Cultural features. This was a long stone wall, and it had a huge old growth red maple growing on it. Okay, so you can see I use a scale, and you can see how huge and old that red maple must be. So we're looking at something old. So go to the next slide. Some features will be glaringly obvious. So in this site, there was a humongous burial mound, huge cultural mound. I don't even know if it was a burial mound. It was so big. It was one of the biggest cultural mounds I've seen. The only place I've seen a bigger cultural mound is there a whole whack load of them in Upper Musquodoboit. And in this Little Forks, I also found a ridge trail. Anybody that's been to the Wallace River hotspot that Doug would refer to knows that there's a ridge trail up on the ridge above the flora. And this also had a similar ridge trail up above flora. So if old oak cultural plants are well established and abundant, all right, so here's Eastern Hop Hornbeam. I think Doug also mentioned the Eastern Hop Hornbeam. It was one of the 7, along with the black cherry, very sacred plants of the Mi'kmaq. They actually ate the seeds, but the main thing they used the tree for was for anything that required hard strength. And one of these things was sled runner wood. And in one of the sites that I went to, I walked down a tree trail and I stopped. I was getting tired. I had to turn back at a spot where there was a black cherry, and in the brook that I was about to cross, there was a sled runner, an old sled runner. And I thought, okay, I have to turn back. So I turned back. And then about a month later, another site to the south of that particular cut block went up. So I came from the other direction following a trail, had no idea, but I in fact went through some kind of encampment and ended up at that same sled runner. So very cool experience to come from 2 directions following trail trees. Just an amazing feeling. So another very well-established cultural plant at this Little Fork site is the hawthorn, and at the Wallace River hotspot, you'll also find hawthorn. So other clues, though, can become nagging mysteries. So the Little Fork site really made me wonder whether or not this could have been not just Ulnug in here, but also an Acadian refugee site. So when I travel to the Cape Breton side, I don't get as far as Cape Breton. I'm hoping Beth Sheila and some of the other people are looking at the cut blocks there. I can't get that far. But when I'm into Guysborough, Pictou, Antigonish counties, what I find is the cultural cherry there is mainly pin cherry, not so much the black cherry. And the general consensus is that the Acadians had a much sweeter tooth than the Ulnug. So the fact that there was so much black cherry made me kind of think, because I only found this one pin cherry on this huge cultural mound, and it was a very old pin cherry. So I was thinking maybe that this mound predates the Acadians, but maybe the black cherries were something that they kind of put there. And there's another kind of cherry that I find in sites that I wonder whether or not the Acadians had influence, and it's what I'm calling a white black cherry. So the bark is really light. In fact, it can be so light that sometimes you think that it might be birch, but it's not. And I only have ever seen this in the sites near Spring Hill, Pugwash, Oxford, etc. And I have to go back and see whether or not is this in fact black cherry. Like Sean Blaney says, yeah, it's black cherry, but I want to go and see, I want to taste it and see what the blooms look like. so are exotic species in interesting places. So there's English oak regenerating in the clear cut near the burial mounds. This is the first place I've ever seen English oak growing in one of these clear cut sites. And the burial mounds are just over here, just behind here. The other thing is forget-me-nots. We're all along the stream by the burial mounds. So I did a little bit of research, and it's a European thing to have that flower be symbolic of remembrance. So I don't know for sure whether or not this is native or exotic, because obviously I went in December, but I could see that there were forget-me-nots all the way down the stream. And I have also seen this in other sites, which potentially could have had some Acadian influence. And also, we do know that right after the expulsion, Minudi, Nepan, Macan, and all those spots were immediately, as soon as the British got out of there, as soon as that is it Beausejour, as soon as that area fell, there was a lot of Acadians that suddenly reappeared and resettled in those areas, Minudi, Macan, Matan area. And this area here, this Little Forks area would have been very easy spot to hide and then go upriver and get back in there. So anyway, cool stuff like that. But that's to remind me, don't go down that rabbit hole. Because I want to just talk briefly about why is there such a veil of secrecy surrounding Crown managed land? Well, 2 words, cultural genocide. From time immemorial, we know that the people occupied this land. In 1493, the doctrine of discovery was pronounced by the Pope. In 1618, and notice the timing of that, by the way, guys, 1493, 1 year after Columbus discovered the New World. So the doctrine of discovery, for those of you who have never heard of it, just means that if a European or somebody Christian lands in a foreign land and the people there aren't Christian, then by virtue of this doctrine of discovery, you can say that the land is not inhabited by humans, I guess, and you can claim it for your own. So in 1618, this doctrine of discovery was used to justify a French claim to this land. But there were lots of wars with the English, many, many wars with the English. And in 1713, the French negotiated to transfer their title claim to the English without consulting the Mi'kmaq. Now, of course, the First Nations did not like that. And there was a lot of fights. There was French Indian Wars. There was all kinds of things that happened over the next 50 years. But in 1760 and 1761, we've all heard of these peace and friendship treaties, and that's when they happened. And in fact, the English made a royal proclamation that hunting grounds indeed are unceded. However, less than 40 years later, the English pushed as many of the First Nations as they could into 11 reserves in our province. And then 75 years later, the Federal Indian Act was passed, which forbid Indigenous ceremonies right in the act. And in 1927, not only was ceremonial activities forbidden, but also Aboriginal culture and language was specifically forbidden by the feds. So 3 years later, the Shubenacadie Residential School opened, and that served to erase culture and memory. All right. So this is the erasure that happened, that First Nations people could not pass along their knowledge of the land. They could not pass along where their burial sites were, where their trail trees were, what this all meant to them, how sacred this was to them. In 1942, the provincial government went even further, and they tried to push these people into only 2 reserves in Shubenacadie and Eskasoni. Now, it didn't work. A lot of them moved, but a lot of them stayed where they were. And in fact, we actually now do have 13 reserves. And of course, some of these people do live off reserve. So less than 10 years later, finally, the First Nations across Canada were allowed to practice their own spirituality again. This is within some of our lifetimes. 1967, this is certainly within my lifetime, our residential school here in Nova Scotia was finally closed down. And it wasn't until 30 years later, though, with the Marshall II decision, that treaty rights were acknowledged to be a thing, and that the only way they can be limited is by compelling public objectives, including conservation, by the way, for those of you that are nervous about that. In 2007, this Mi'kmaq Nova Scotia Framework Agreement was finally signed. So it took them 8 years to come from the Marshall II decision to the point where they have now got some steps that they go to consult. And then the province this year in March is finally going to officially recognize their language, which is crazy. So we're still not quite there yet. So all this land is, unceded and Crown managed. You notice I don't call it Crown Forest. I can't anymore. Crown mismanaged forest is territory of the Omagh. When these people were moved into reserves, control of their territory was assumed by settler culture. Their children were taken from them, so the elders couldn't pass along their language, knowledge, and traditions. It was deliberate cultural genocide. Now, I'm not going to do this part. I don't feel like I can really speak for the Assembly of First Nations, but if you want to go to their webpage, it's there at the bottom from their mi'kmaqrights.com, and they talk about a concept called Netukulimk, okay, it's right here, and it's defined as the use, protection, and stewardship of land and resources provided to all by the Creator for the sustenance and well-being of the Mi'kmaq, okay? So you can read that yourself. They do have a land strategy. They're in consultation with the province to reclaim control of some surplus and C4 conservation lands. And there is a presentation on this website that I just referred to. And this fellow is Craig Hodder, and he manages their GIS database. And this is specifically what their strategy is looking for. In terms of this whole document, I don't know if it's actually in the public domain, but he has said that they're looking for land adjacent to their communities, existing archaeology sites, coastal lake frontage, future potential wharves, indigenous protected and conserved areas, culturally significant areas, land use activities and opportunities, urban centers, and economic development. And again, there is a presentation on their site about it. All right, thank you for those of you that hung in there. So maybe Bob, unless there's a slide people want me to go back to, maybe can I press stop share? Is that okay by people? Okay.
I can stop. Well, that was great, Mary. You did a wonderful job, and
thank you
I
for your
learned so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you for. Are there any other questions? All I can say is it's really fun following those trail trees, guys, and you may get diverted on some of your excursions now and follow one and find something really cool.
Mary, how prevalent are these trail trees in other parts of Nova Scotia? Is it confined, not confined, but more plentiful in the area that you explored, or do you think they're everywhere?
Well, I'll tell you, and I've become strategic in where I go. It's been my experience, and it makes complete sense that the Mi'kmaq like to live near water. So when I see a cut block go up that's near water, that goes right to the top of my priority list. That's where I head. And invariably, unless it's just a swamp, even the swamps they went to, because they went and they were hunting for birds and fish and all kinds of things like that. If there is water, you will find trail trees.
Ah, okay. It's really interesting.
It is.
I'd like to ask about the burial mounds. As we know, they've been identifying burial sites from next to residential schools. Has this been done on any of these burial mounds?
Has what been done, Carol?
LADAR, I think is what they use.
Oh, I don't know. I would not be surprised. But I mean, they're hiding the cultural archaeological GIS layer from the public and from First Nations. So
but you've actually seen what you think of burial mounds.
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
but you don't have proof. But this technology would give you that proof.
Carol, I actually am an archaeologist. So yeah, one of my degrees is environmental archaeology. So, I mean, my word is good as the next archaeologist. If I say that it's a burial mound, it 99.9% sure it is. When I'm walking along and I see burial mounds all the way along a trail with trail trees, and yeah, I have absolutely no doubt that they are burial mounds.
But you haven't seen any bones, I take it.
I actually did find a bone that I reported to the police, but no, I have not. I don't do any digging. I don't remove anything from the site. I observe wild flora principles, which is that you go, you observe, you photograph, you might turn something over, but I don't remove anything from the site.
Right, but that's where this technology that's been used near these residential schools would be non-invasive, but would show just where the people are buried.
Yeah. The First Nations people were everywhere in Nova Scotia, especially near water. And again, if you're finding trail trees, if you're finding burial mounds, if you're finding the burial mounds are larger in high areas along the trail, larger along the water, you've got a pattern. So these are burial mounds, and burial mounds have the same protection as a cemetery. You can't disturb them. So if you can document that you've got burial mounds on a cut block and you report that. So what I've been doing, I report it I actually send a little heads up to the Mi'kmaq Rights. So I'm in contact with their archaeologist. I send a little heads up to them about why I believe this is a site, a cultural site. And then I'll write my comment to the province. And right at the beginning of the comment, I say, let me just read to you what I say, because if you guys are doing this too, and I hope you guys do, because I can't get everywhere, as you know. Let me just find an example. Okay, very first thing I say is consultation with First Nations must, and I put that in block letters, be done before the clear-cut plans for whatever it is proceed. I tell them when I visited the land, and I tell them what I observe. I observe burial mounds, cultural flora, trail trees, and many other unusual archaeological features if I had observed unusual archaeological features. So the site for Little Forks, I say including stone walls and berms and a constructed ridge trail along the access roads and into the blocks. And then I also talk about the ecology of the area as well, because sometimes there is a way that they can get a little bit of a cut in there. Like if I find a monoculture plantation on the site of a certain size. So on this particular site, there was a monoculture European red pine plantation. So I tell them about that, but I also tell them if there's something globally endangered. For example, native ash was on that site. So that's the type of thing I say, and it seems to have put the brakes on a lot of the cutting in my area.
Well done, Mary.
Oh,
Mary, Mary, there's some of these sites that there's no hope of ever getting into. I'm looking at some of the current ones. It's still under consultation down in Guysborough County.
Okay. I'm going, is that Carol Bradley?
Yep.
Carol, I'm gonna try and get to that site. What I did, like yesterday, I went to a site where I had to walk an hour to get into it. The day before, I went to a site where I had to walk 2 hours to get into it. So I am gonna try and get into that site.
Oh my God.
Gonna go on Wednesday.
Yeah, you are a saint. I really, I do appreciate your work so much.
Meeting, I'll call you back, okay?
Sorry?
Bye.
I think Rochelle is talking to somebody else. I
I'm
don't know.
sorry, yeah, I just got a long distance call and I told her I was on the Zoom meeting, pardon me. When you're finished, I have a question.
Okay,
I'm just gonna go back to Carol Bradley. Carol, yeah, because that site has got a huge lake on it. And
yes.
It's even got a beautiful island in the middle of the lake, Mitchell Lake, it's called, right?
I think I'm going to put in a general comment because that's all I can do. But perhaps I'll be in touch with you separately and we can talk about getting to some of the ones in Hants County and Halifax County where you can't get.
Okay, I've tried to get to them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at least the one, well, I can't show, but did you see that? All those red marks? There was a lot of them in Hants County. And
Yes, I did. And that's interesting because like I got to that site out behind the Drescher Mines as well in Walton.
Oh,
But,
good. Yes, I did too. Yeah.
Yeah, partly I don't know what to look for. Anyhow, I'll be in touch perhaps separately then. If
Okay.
that's okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Carol.
Right.
Rochelle?
Yes, you mentioned stone walls twice.
Yes.
What exactly do stone walls have to do with this?
Stone walls, I think it's an Acadian site. I think it's an Acadian refuge site. I think they were probably there in 1758 or 59. I think the Acadians, if you look on the map, if you go up, I think it's either the Macan or the Napan River, you get to Minooty, which was a super popular site for the Acadians. And when the British came in 1759 and the expulsions, et cetera, happened, they didn't catch all the Acadians. We know that. We know that the women for sure got away. And we also know that Minooty and Napan and Macan almost immediately after the British got out of there and went back to Halifax, they were back. They were back farming. So where had they gone? I think this is a site where they had gone. I think that's what the evidence is showing us. But I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole.
So the idea would be that the Acadians might have built stone walls near existing burial mounds, or that the burial mounds were still being built?
I think they would have buried. They were intermarrying. They'd been there since the 1600s.
Mhm.
There was intermarrying. There was a lot of cultural interchange that was happening. I'll tell you, I found at the burial mound site, there was a wooden cross on a tree. So. So is everybody happy to go now? Are you guys ready for sleep?
That was a major thing to put together, Mary.
Yeah, really, that could have been a full evening right there, Mary. That was good.
Oh, thanks, guys. Well, it's really important stuff, and I wanted you guys to know what I had been doing because I haven't reported to you since the summer. So
Well, thanks for putting all that effort into it too for the presentation.
you're welcome.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay, well, if we're done, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody and end our meeting.
Oh, wait a second. There's a couple of questions. Sorry.
All right, okay, go ahead.
Have you reported any of these sites to the Mi'kmaq? Yes, I report them to Mi'kmaq Rights, to their archaeology department. And then, she left. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna say my farewells. And so everybody should know there's a hike scheduled for next Saturday. You should be getting email with the details. It's on the website now. And our next meeting is in 4 weeks' time, I guess, third week of February.